And what's up, everyone? Welcome in GC Live Friday episode of the show. Of course, brought to you by our good buddy Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network, clinthammond.com, 803-771-6933. If you're on the video version of the show, you see Clint's smiling face right there. He is the branch manager of the Columbia Mortgage Network. Hit him up, see Hammond at mortgagenetwork.com if you're in the market for a new home or you just want to see what your options are to maybe refinance a home. Clint is your guy, and he is the presenting sponsor right here on GC Live every single time that we have a show. Speaking of shows, I want to go ahead and start putting the word out there, y'all. Be ready next Wednesday. It's going to be a little bit different. 9 a.m. to noon. We will be essentially what I will call, I guess, a simulcast, Chris. It will be a GamecockCentral.com National Signing Day special on 107.5. So if you're local, you can listen to it on the radio, 107.5. You can listen to it 1075thegame.com if you wanted to. But also, we will have our video set up to where it will be streaming right here on GC Live, just like normal. It'll just be 9 to 12. So however you want to tune in, we'll be checking on the chat box as well on that day. And so Herndon Chevrolet will be the sponsor of the show, but Clint Hammond of Mortgage Network will, of course, as always, be our streaming sponsor right here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So look out for that, 9 a.m. to noon. I know once we get rolling, we've got so many things to hit. Once we get rolling, I will probably forget. So I want to go ahead and get that out of the way. Chris, 5 days until signing day. Oh, man, it has been a week in Gamecock Nation.
You said it, man. There is a lot to get to. Can't believe it's just 5 days away, but the days have been going by super fast. It was Monday like yesterday, and it's absolutely flying by. So tons of activity. Obviously, there's some things that Gamecock Nation are going to want to talk about. I'm sure it'll be the hot topics, but there are also a lot of guys still, in on the board for this team in the 2022 class and transfers, Wes. Intriguing transfers on the board, some intriguing 2022 prospects. Let's talk about it. Let's dive in.
Yeah, let's get I would say let's get the two big ones out of the way first. Probably the two, I don't know, maybe people need to vent. It's been an interesting last 24 hours or so. The news last night: Antonio Williams committing to Clemson. Lots of differing opinions out there about this one. A situation where, Chris, I would say it is surprising, but not surprising. It's like I think most people thought this one would go through the weekend at least, and it's kind of been a little bit difficult to track. I think it's increasingly difficult to track exactly what is happening with prospects behind the scenes, I think. And in this case, certainly a blow to South Carolina, certainly a situation where they have put a lot of time and energy and effort into recruiting Antonio Williams. He, we had been tracking this leading up to last night, and the big thing we were keeping an eye on was, will this Clemson visit take place? And, my guess, and this part is just a guess, I believe that it was probably more likely that he was going to take the visit and then probably make a commitment to Clemson after the visit. I'm wondering if maybe after word started sort of leaking out that it was probably going to be Clemson, if there wasn't an audible there, just to go ahead and sort of get ahead of it and go ahead and make the announcement. It seemed to me like, going back just sort of the way the Clemson side was reporting on this thing, it wasn't always necessarily solidified that this visit was going to take place this week, but I think it was very much anticipated, even before the North-South cancellation as far as Williams playing in it. Obviously, the game's still happening. So I think if you look back with hindsight, the breadcrumbs were there that this was going to play out like this, but certainly from a South Carolina perspective, I'm sure it hurts. And, I think South Carolina would have liked their their last opportunity to go in home and have an opportunity to close this thing out. So I think that's maybe that there are some fans that are going to get ticked off just because somebody picks the other school, which is silly, honestly. But I think there is an increased frustration from the fan base just about the fact that Carolina put so much effort into it, and then there was not that final in-home visit to take place.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest. There are a couple of big frustrations in it, I would say, Wes, on the part of whether you say Gamecock fans or my guess would be for the people involved in recruiting Antonio Williams would be, just the fact that you didn't get that opportunity, right? Everybody was kind of looking and knowing that Clemson visit was a distinct possibility. If you're South Carolina, you don't want them to take that visit. If you're Clemson, you do want them to take that visit, right? And as the week progressed from, last week, the state title games, Wes, that was an angle that we were following. Will he end up taking the Clemson visit? That's something we were tracking throughout that weekend. And with each passing day, it kind of started seeming more and more likely that he would take that visit. It kind of seems, just in the postmortem, the aftermath, and what we've been digging around on, what we've learned is it seemed like it was a little bit more solidified than that on the Clemson end, which means there maybe wasn't as great of communication, right? That it wasn't being communicated that to South Carolina, at least, that was as much of a possibility. That's a big disappointment. And obviously, another one was South Carolina strategically wanted to have Shane Beamer in late in this one. And you can understand why. There's a lot of moving parts. You have 2 weeks during the contact period. South Carolina's visiting, they're hosting visitors at times. They're on the road visiting tons of prospects, whether they're committed, whether they're uncommitted. Still a lot of uncommitted guys on the board. So South Carolina schedules that visit later in the process, Beamer's final in-home. And I think probably the biggest disappointment is not having the chance for Beamer to go in home at the end of this process. And it became evident that wasn't going to happen. I'm with you, Wes. I think everything got pushed up from maybe, as opposed to early next week or even on signing day next week, it got pushed up because everything did start getting out. But given the effort that, Shane Beamer, Justin Stepp, everybody put into this one, I think that was probably the biggest disappointment for everyone, Gamecock fans included.
Yeah, and clearly South Carolina wasn't just angling for the final in-home for Antonio Williams. Like, from his perspective, this was actually, as far as we knew it, going to literally be the final Shane Beamer in-home of this 2-week contact period leading into early signing day. Saturday night is the absolute last time that you can do that. There are no in-homes on Sunday. So that sort of told you the amount of how big of a priority he was for South Carolina as far as the effort and energy they were putting into this, that they were holding that last spot, time in recruiting is, I don't want to say it's everything, but it's a lot. So I think that's kind of interesting that it played out the way it did. And you could already start to see when the Clemson visit when it seemed clear it was probably going to happen, then you start going, wait a second, when will South Carolina be able to go in home? And then I think this all sort of came to a head yesterday, as we're going live here Friday, came to a head on Thursday. And that was that question on here about any chance Antonio Williams flips. No, I mean, this thing's over. You don't commit on Thursday night, the week before signing day, and pick the other in-state school and then flip. It's pretty much over. There won't be any in-home visits. I assume he's still going to Clemson this weekend. I don't even know if that's the case, but I would assume that he will be going to Clemson. So the other, I would say, big story right now that I guess we have to hit on is that Javonte McClendon will no longer be in South Carolina's class, Chris. We have confirmed independently on Gamecock Central that is the case, that basically, remove him from the commitment list. I'll defer completely to Ben Portnoy from the state, who, credit where it's due, was all over this one, Chris, reporting that McClendon is facing felony charges relating to, these are all Ben's words, related to what appears to have been a road rage incident last week in Florida. McClendon was arrested by the Lakeland Police Department on November 28th, according to public records made available online by Polk County Sheriff's Department. I get the impression, Chris, from the South Carolina perspective, it's just sort of like you got to kind of wash your hands of this. Obviously, it's an alleged incident at this point, to be completely clear. This will be sorted out in court. I don't know what the next steps are. Not even going to pretend to know what the next steps are down there for Javonte McClendon. But as far as South Carolina is concerned, again, we have removed him from the commit list.
Yeah, and that's first of all, I wasn't there. I don't know. We read basically what Ben published in his reporting there for the state. So no idea, but unfortunate situation. Fortunately, it seems like everyone was okay, regardless of what happened, who was at fault, etc. But yeah, it's a situation where South Carolina, you can't sign Javonte McClendon at this point for obvious reasons, and recently bumped to 4-star status. To go to, not to be crass about it, but as a player, a lot of people are going to think about that. What does it mean for the class? He'd had a really good senior year, had good film, and this is a DB heavy class for South Carolina. I mean, bunch of DBs in this class, which is obviously a need position in terms of upgrading the talent, stacking, some more numbers on this roster. And you had guys at a variety of positions. You had some guys who are viewed as corners, safeties, a guy or two that could be a nickel, a couple guys that could be kind of maybe any of those, So McClendon was a guy that was probably going to be a safety and had a chance, I think, to be a really good player. So unfortunately, not going to get that opportunity at this point, Wes.
Yeah, so by the way, some breaking news coming in as we're sitting here on the show live. By the time you listen to this, probably won't be breaking news anymore if you're listening on the podcast. But Tony Elliott, per Pete Thamel, has officially Virginia is officially set to hire Tony Elliott as their new head coach. So that situation was kind of, we're not going to go all into that, but obviously sometimes that has a direct relation with South Carolina. We'll see what Clemson does there, but that situation had been going back and forth really for a number of days now. Now it does appear that Tony Elliott will be leaving Clemson and will be Virginia's next head football coach. All right, Chris, let's talk about some of the guys that are still out there, some of the targets that are still out there. And essentially, here's the thing I've learned, y'all. There's a lot of people who are very tied in, like read every single thing that gets posted on Gamecock Central when it comes to recruiting. And then there are people that are more sort of follow it a little more casually is probably the best way to say it. So I think this will serve as both a sort of very latest update, even for those who follow it closely, and hopefully will also serve as a broader update for those of you who follow it casually and just want to know, who do I need to know about going into next week? So, Chris, I think we've got to start with the guy at the top of this list and the guy that's in the photo here, Jaysean Barham, 4-star linebacker, will be committing Saturday, 3 p.m. Gamecocks are firmly in this. It's been an interesting recruitment, and South Carolina sort of recruited him as an edge guy. I still, some of the other edge guys you see here, I listed as, edge is their position. I left Jaysean as a linebacker just because I think this kid is that versatile, that good, that I think you almost get him on campus and see where he fits best. Point being, if South Carolina can pull this off, he'll instantly be, I would say, the best prospect in their class. The rankings will probably agree with that when all is said and done as well. Certainly a kid that's very highly ranked right now. And, I think South Carolina's in a pretty good place. That's the impression you get. Also, you have to sort of acknowledge this is a kid that has played his cards closer than about any that you're going to come across.
There are two guys on that list, Wes, and I won't spoil the other one until we actually get to them, that are very hard to read in this class. And Barham, like you said, is one of them. Very difficult to read. Had a really good official visit to South Carolina. He's been in town for a game. All indications are that, or not all indications. There have been a lot of positive indications for South Carolina. Now, I think what you've got to be wary of going into this one is the fact that he is so quiet. So it's not like it's just out there behind the scenes that this is a done deal. We hear that sometimes going into announcements. We pretty much have a sense of, unless there's some shock, we know what to expect. We know what's coming. Here, I think there's some reasons for South Carolina to feel good, but there's also some reasons of you're not really sure. So I think you got to consider the fact that this is a kid from Maryland. He's had all the schools in that geographic region recruiting him. So Oklahoma was actually a geographic outlier. They were a big factor. Then Lincoln Riley leaves. So you got to watch Penn State. They just lost their defensive coordinator, Brent Pry, to the head coaching position at Virginia Tech. I do think you got to watch in-state Maryland anytime for a Maryland kid. But there's some pretty positive indications to where we're going to be monitoring this one. But I would stop short of calling it a done deal. But you're right, man. This kid, I think he could play anywhere. Like, he's an edge rush guy, but if you stuck him at just a true linebacker position and let him go run, he can do that. Really interesting skill set. Really good size and really good movement skills.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, there is, to me, in recruiting these days, there is like a sense of whenever there's a vibe going around about a particular kid online, or I'm just going to say it, when like a crystal ball comes in and everybody runs and sort of posts it everywhere, not everybody, but a lot of people like assume that it's gospel. I mean, we'll talk about transfers in a little bit. I can't tell you how many people were borderline arguing that Austin Stogner had committed to South Carolina, that he was going to South Carolina. There was 100% because one person predicted that he would end up at South Carolina, which may end up being a pretty decent prediction in the end. But, much like I think maybe this time last week, there were probably some fairly positive feels going around. I think South Carolina's camp felt pretty positive about Antonio Williams maybe this time last week, and people sort of caught on to that. But it's not ever gospel until, and I say that firmly as someone, we're reporting on this stuff, and hopefully, we're gonna be accurate. I don't even know what the number is. You hope to be accurate 100% of the time, but you just sort of have to know these are high school kids. Nothing is gospel. And even now when they're signed, they could be in the portal in a year too. So, it's kind of, I don't know. I think there's a sense right now that South Carolina is a lock from some people to get Jaysean Barham tomorrow. He's not a lock. Now, I do think there is cautious optimism from the South Carolina side that they're going to get good news at 3:00 on Saturday. And I think there is whatever the opposite of that is, from what I've read from all the people that are tied in at Penn State. There's cautious pessimism on their end that it's not going to be Penn State. So could the kid pull a shocker? Absolutely. And if he pulled a shocker, it really shouldn't be a shocker, in my opinion.
That's right.
But if Carolina gets this guy, you're getting, I believe, a true early impact type linebacker / edge guy / whatever you want to call him. You're getting a great player who can go chase people down, arrives at the quarterback with a bad attitude and gets there in a hurry.
Well, man, here's the thing. I love, by the way, how you just took the liberties of saying he's a linebacker. You kind of just slotted him in, but he really could play it. Mike Peterson's been spearheading this recruitment, right? And there was carryover here. Barham is not an entirely new prospect Mike Peterson, of course, is now the only carryover from the Will Muschamp staff and has been recruiting him for a long time. So don't discount that. That's helped a lot. Peterson has been, there's been 2 weeks of the contact period. Basically, he's been by there a couple of different times. Shane Beamer was in tow one day up in Maryland when he was that was yesterday, I guess, Wes, on Thursday, making his swing through there. And again, things very quiet. But Barham, I mean, I'm not so sure, Wes, that if South Carolina signs this kid that he's not at linebacker next year, right? I mean, there's a need at both, right? There's a need if Jaysean Barham stepped on campus in Columbia, there's a pass rushing need at edge because South Carolina's losing Aaron Sterling and JJ Enigbare after this year. But there's also a need at linebacker, and really he could do any. So do they slot him in kind of a unique position? Does he stick to one position? I think that'll be very interesting. Obviously, the first step is to go ahead and land him. So they certainly, what we do know is that they have a good shot to do that.
Yeah, they do. And I saw some chatter from some fans just online, Penn State fans actually talking about how they have not had a whole lot of success recruiting St. Francis High School, which is in Baltimore. That's where Barham goes to school. And B, that some of these kids kind of run together as far as a group, that if whoever gets Barham will probably have a nice little in if you can maybe continue it in the future at St. Francis as well, which has a number of really good prospects and will certainly continue to have prospects in the future. So yeah, we'll see, man. I think in all the sort of downside of recruiting and everything that the fans have endured the last couple of days, adding Jaysean Barham would be, I mean, I would say a big step, at least for a few days, for fans being able to kind of forget about that. Let's go ahead and roll down the list here, man, fairly quickly. We probably won't take quite as much time on all the other guys as we just did on Jaysean Barham. If Barham commits, he ends up being kind of, I would say, the crown jewel of the class right now. So worth talking about a little bit more. I'm intrigued by South Carolina's pursuit of Ramon Brown. I was talking to somebody who covers Virginia Tech today and was told that Virginia Tech sort of, they feel comfortable. They feel like they're not going to lose him. Ramon Brown, not a guy that says a whole lot. He did allow Carolina to go in home. Shane Beamer, Montario Hardesty, who's recruited him, South Carolina's running backs coach, Marcus Satterfield, all at his house on Thursday night. I don't know, man. To me, if a prospect lets you come in home, the door is open. And the impression I get, the in-home went well. I think South Carolina, to an extent, thinks the door is cracked. If you made me predict, I would probably just go with the easy answer, the default, that it stays. The par answer would be that he sticks with VT. But it's certainly been opened up by the fact that there was a coaching change there and that Montario Hardesty has really just hung in there on this kid.
Yeah, and South Carolina really had to work hard to even get in on him. Obviously they were working from behind and from a clock standpoint too, right? When they, were hired as a staff. So they were able to get what was at that time the fifth and final official visit slot for Ramon Brown back in the summer, got it. But when he committed, it was Virginia Tech 1, who obviously got his commitment. And the thought was that Maryland was number 2. So South Carolina was still behind, but they have kept on him. They've gotten him back to campus. The only feedback, like you said, man, Ramon does not talk a lot, but he did tell me, hey, the trip was good. It wasn't too far. The drive wasn't too bad. And that was really the only comment he gave, which I thought was interesting because South Carolina is the geographic outlier in terms of the schools that have been recruiting him. So obviously Virginia Tech in state, he's had West Virginia, he's had Maryland after him. Can't remember, what was the fifth school, Wes? I can't even remember it right now. But there was another one in the mix, but I'm not sure if they really are now. I know that Neil Brown from West Virginia, like Shane Beamer, also did an in-home visit. I'm with you. Smart money, Still some time to go. I think it's more likely he sticks with VT, but Carolina hanging in there. So let's see what happens.
All right, so let's go on down the list here, man. So tell you what, I'm gonna skip a couple of guys. We're gonna come back to Jake Johnson, and we're gonna fly right over James Pierce. I think Pierce is a long shot. I know Gamecock fans have sort of, maybe had their eyes on him for a long time, even before he moved up to 4-star status. I think a lot of fans, to their credit, appreciated how good of a prospect, how good of a pass rusher James Pierce really is. I mean, this kid is a legit off the edge guy. South Carolina going to play it to the end. Mike Peterson expected at his game on Saturday. Chambers High is playing for the state title. Carolina's going to play it out. I think he's a big long shot. I think, Chris, you said Tennessee maybe feels pretty good on him.
Yep.
You've got some other guys there at that school that South Carolina is recruiting. The Smothers kid at running back, who's a class of 2023. Hardesty will be there to watch him on Saturday as well, or at least is scheduled to. So Carolina going to stay in there, but I wouldn't get your hopes up on Pierce. Stone Blanton is next on our list. Another one that Carolina has gone the distance with. You can't say that Stone Blanton hasn't given other schools a chance to recruit him, to put their best foot forward, and the kid's really just been open to going through the entire process, letting various coaches come in for in-homes, taking multiple visits. We thought Carolina was kind of done, and then Stone Blanton pops up late in the season at a game. So I think Clayton White has a good relationship here. I'll steal your phrase, man. Smart money. I probably do go against the Gamecocks again here, that he stays in state. But Blanton does strike me, and I'm gonna sort of play the fence here. He kind of strikes me as that guy that if I predicted it, I wouldn't predict South Carolina. But if just we got word on signing day, hey, Stone Blanton's about to sign with South Carolina, it wouldn't really surprise me by any means either, because he just strikes me as the type kid who is willing to go a bit against the status quo if he thinks that's just truly the best place for him.
Yeah, and I think I'd go back to when we were talking about Barham and Ramon Brown, two guys from that DMV area, and kind of the ability to pull them away from that area. Well, you're facing a similar thing with Blanton because he's from Mississippi, and so he's committed to Mississippi State for baseball. Both the in-state schools, Ole Miss and Mississippi State, have been recruiting him harder. Now, I certainly think, Wes, that Mississippi State, their football program, has been recruiting him harder than Ole Miss, right, from what it seems. Ole Miss is recruiting a bunch of other linebackers. You kind of get the sense that they would take him, right, but don't know like how hard they've really been after him, whereas South Carolina, Mississippi State, they've been really recruiting him hard. Zach Arnett, the defensive coordinator from Mississippi State, was in last night. Mike Leach used his in-home last week. So I think that's the key. Can you pull him away? This summer, the indications were really good for South Carolina. Blanton was in that same big recruiting weekend that Ryan Brubaker from Pennsylvania, the offensive lineman, was in. And Brubaker was uncommitted at the time. And we heard those two guys like in similar terms about how blown away they were. Brubaker ended up committing. Blanton didn't. But then, like you said, Wes, things fell off. And then they kind of circled back. So I'm with you. Right now, sitting here on Friday, with a few days to go, I would still lean Mississippi State for the simple fact that you got the in-state baseball commitment to MSU already in place, and the fact that he's a Mississippi kid, right, that still has a good relationship with that staff. But the Gamecocks are still in it.
Yes, they are. And, I mean, we're going to shoot y'all straight. It just kind of hit me. A lot of these guys were saying, Carolina's in it, but our prediction would go the other way. But we will pride ourselves on telling you not what you want to hear, but really how we think it probably will or probably could play out. So with Blanton, though, again, one that we'll just see. We'll find out what happens. So right now, if you're tallying at home, I think if we had to make a prediction, we would go again. It's 2:34 Friday afternoon. Things can sometimes change quick. We would probably go South Carolina with Barham, VT with Ramon Brown, Tennessee with James Pierce, Mississippi State with Stone Blanton. Intriguing next guy, Chris, in that it's funny how sometimes names disappear and then we never really hear the names again as far as being connected to South Carolina. And sometimes names pop up, they go away for a few months, and then we get word, hey, this guy is worth keeping an eye on again. That would be the case with R. Mason Thomas. There was some talk in the summer, that he may be committing to South Carolina. Ended up committing to Iowa State. That's where he's committed right now. The door is definitely open here, not just for South Carolina, but other schools. Reportedly, unless this has changed, reportedly going to visit Kentucky this weekend. And Chris, I know you touch base with him. Is the word now that he will wait until the February signing period?
That has been his plan, Wes. And like you said, to go back to Iowa State, a lot of people say, Iowa State, that's kind of weird. They've been recruiting him for a long time. So long-standing relationships there really kind of helped and won out at the end, although he took a summer official to Carolina. He worked out for Carolina this summer. So a few interesting storylines there. Number one, it is the fact that he's looking to wait until February. So Kentucky has still been communicating with him. LSU's still been communicating, and obviously South Carolina. So Mike Peterson actually made a school stop to go see R. Mason Thomas this week during the contact period. Shane Beamer did not, but, we don't really know where things are right now, right? Because you've still got Barham out there, as you've got him as a linebacker, but it could be an edge, right, Wes? Then you have James Pierce out there, which it'll be interesting to see if Pierce signs Wednesday. I do favor Tennessee, but there's a thought that maybe he waits, maybe he signs. People don't really know. So where does R. Mason Thomas fit in? Is there enough mutual interest there on each side? Certainly it's a guy that they've come back to and continued the communication with. So that one probably, unless things change, not going to be resolved on Wednesday, and probably going to be a guy that will continue covering throughout December and then into January too.
Well, it brings up I think this is a good time to mention, Chris, everything kind of resets after the early signing period. And, sometimes guys get told no. And what I mean by that is sometimes, and that's, I'm not talking about R. Mason Thomas in this instance, but I just mean in general, guys that end up waiting. There may be a guy or two that has their eyes set on a logo school and get told, sorry, man, we're full. And then the market sort of resets a bit and you reevaluate your board. Other schools are reevaluating their board. And then you kind of go from there with R. Mason Thomas. As far as we know, as far as what we were told, again, there was no Beamer in home, which if R. Mason Thomas is still heavily interested in South Carolina, it actually maybe plays in your favor because you only get one as far as the head coach. So then you can turn around and use it in January.
Yeah, and so the January, I actually had to look this up today.
Does it reset?
Yeah, so in January you get a 2-week open period is what I was trying to come up with, and I think it's somewhere around January 14th through the 29th or 15th through the 29th. So there's a 2-week, open period at that point where you're going to see more movement among prospects, and that applies actually to transfers too. Transfers are really under the same umbrella of the NCAA recruiting calendar.
Well, and so that I'm saying it right, Chris, do you know, can a coach take another, does it reset as far as the head coach's visits?
Oh,
I don't think it does, right?
Yeah, one during that contact period. So I think the way that I think they technically classify it on the recruiting calendar is the contact period starts, when did it start, Wes? December, whatever, or late November.
November 28th.
November 28th until January 29th.
Yep.
And then in between that is when you have dead periods, some quiet periods, whatever.
Yep. And you get 6 visits per prospect
That's right.
throughout that entire time, but you get 1 head coach visit. So yeah, the point I was getting at is basically if any of these guys at Beamer didn't use the in-home, maybe it plays in your favor down the road that if they don't sign, you turn around and use the in-home during January, basically. So we'll see. Again, this could be one of those things where we don't really it really goes nowhere, or this could be one of those things where he takes a really hard look at South Carolina and ends up being a major target down the stretch for the final signing period. Xavier Short, the final guy we have listed here, Chapin. He's played wide receiver for the most part at Chapin, but is being recruited sort of as a tight end / H back for South Carolina. Someone that I believe they think can grow into really more of a Jaheim Bell role. That's the way I think is probably the best way to describe it. And Xavier's got a decision of his own here. He's been committed to App State. I think if we're being completely honest, if this offer would have come in the summer, then he's probably a lock for the Gamecocks. I think this is the offer he's always wanted. This is sort of a dream school scenario for him. But App State has been in this thing for a long time. He's been committed to App State. Former Gamecock coach Pat Washington is recruiting him up there. So Short, who's playing in North-South on Saturday afternoon, really is going to have to weigh dream school scenario versus sticking with App State, which, those guys have been with him the longest right now.
Yeah, and Xavier, from my understanding, is a really good kid. They think very highly of him over at Chapin, and there's a loyalty factor. A lot of people would say, "Oh, that's easy, just flip," and some kids would, right? And I still tend to think that he will eventually, Wes. If we're going through making our smart money predictions or whatever I termed it, that's what I would put it on. That on Wednesday, Xavier Short's with the Gamecocks in some form or fashion, maybe before then, maybe on that day. But it's not a slam dunk because of that loyalty factor, and so that's certainly understandable. They've done a good job with relationships. Xavier's a relationship, kind of oriented guy, but this is still someone I think they got a really good shot with. I think it's a good offer for South Carolina. That it's someone that they've liked for a while. They've had him in camp. They've monitored him. They've seen him. I just wanted to take time and work through the process and see where things fell. And so now they're on board officially with an offer. And I tend to think, Wes, that a flip is at some point going to happen.
Yeah, and they're not now that they have offered, they are coming at him very hard. Not one of these situations where they've sort of offered but are kind of slow playing. Once the offer was in place, he became a priority for South Carolina from everything I've been told. And they've been by Chapin several times during this process, and certainly someone that will be tracking and maybe even all the way up to Wednesday, all the way up to signing day, as far as what he is going to end up doing. Let's move on to portal possibilities, Chris. And I think it's worth mentioning transfer portal recruiting just a little bit different than high school recruiting. Some trends I've noticed. First of all, portal offers, like when guys get an offer, some guys do tweet those out, I guess, but it's really not, it doesn't seem to be tracked the way that it is out of high school, especially for the big time guys. I feel like if maybe an FCS kid is in the portal and he's trying to move up and then some big Power 5 school offers him, yeah, that's going to get tweeted out. These big name guys, they are playing things very close to the vest. And they're not, what like the guys we're about to say. Does South Carolina have an offer out to these guys? Like, are there even formal offers in transfer portal recruiting, or is it just like, hey man, are you interested? We want you here. You know what I mean? Like it just feels different to me. So whenever we say portal possibilities, I don't even want that to be misconstrued as us like even reporting, hey, South Carolina has offered this guy, this guy, this guy, and this guy. A lot of the portal time you put in, I believe, is also based on who do you get feedback from. If you see a guy's in the portal and you're South Carolina and you like him as a player, you reach out. And if you're not getting much feedback or any feedback at all, you sort of just move on to the next guy relatively quickly, I would think. So to me, these, Chris, are the three names, and this is by no means a complete list. But these are the three names right now. I think that there just seems to be traction.
Yep.
And we'll go back again. Jake Johnson. There's a direct connection, as you all know, between these two lists. Jake Johnson, one of the final 2022 targets, and Max Johnson, who I would call a portal, not just a portal possibility, a portal target for South Carolina. I think we can probably go that far. The portal is redefining college football. And I believe, Chris, there will probably be several lesser known names that will pop up that South Carolina will be recruiting in the transfer portal. I think portal is going to be a heavy emphasis again. Certainly quarterback has been a consideration with the Antonio Williams news, and even probably without that news, I think receiver is going to be a priority. Maybe you even take multiple receivers from the portal potentially. But I think as far as what we know right now, these are the three guys that I included in the graphic. Oklahoma quarterback Spencer Rattler, Oklahoma tight end Austin Stogner, and then, of course, LSU quarterback Max Johnson. Let's talk about Max Johnson and Jake Johnson, though. Jake Johnson, number one tight end in the country, according to many sites. And most people seem to think this is a true package deal, that they want to play together. I don't really think we're going to see many quotes or articles or anything like that with these guys saying much. But I do think, Chris, we can safely say that there's a mutual respect from their camp with Shane Beamer and how he operates, and that these guys are at the absolute very least worth keeping an eye on at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. You know, the point that you made earlier, which is a good one about some of the bigger name or most of the bigger name, you know, Power 5 portal entries aren't out there advertising their recruitment. And I think generally a lot of that, Wes, is they've been through it. You know, I mean, you're not out there doing a bunch of interviews and doing recruiting camps during the summers. And I mean, it's just so different, right? They've already been in a college football program. They're kind of hyper focused on what is the next thing. Sometimes you have a shorter window. Sometimes you have a smaller number of schools that are interested. Sometimes you have a huge number of schools, maybe more than you had in high school. But the Johnsons, or Max Johnson more specifically, because he's the one actually in the portal, you know, he really embodies what you were talking about. Very quiet. Like, he announced he's going in the portal. That's probably about all you're going to get. You know, my understanding is the family, Brad Johnson, former NFL quarterback, and thorn in the side of the Carolina Panthers, Wes. He, you know, and the rest of his family they're very close knit, and they're going to keep things quiet. So if Johnson, we probably are going to learn after he goes somewhere, after he ends up enrolling somewhere, we might hear where all he visited or what schools he was truly considering. We do know South Carolina's in the mix. We've heard that. We've confirmed that. We also know South Carolina's in the mix before Max entered the portal. South Carolina's in the mix with Jake Johnson. He's under the high school recruiting rules. Fair game. He reopened his recruitment recently. So Shane Beamer's been by the school. They've been in contact a lot. Eric Kimrey's been by the school. Zeb Nolan, his father, Travis Nolan, is their high school coach. Max's former high school coach and Jake's current high school coach at Oconee County in Georgia. So lots of carryover. Jake Johnson thinks very highly of Shane Beamer because Shane Beamer recruited him when he was at Oklahoma. So a lot of ties there, a quiet recruitment, but definitely one to watch. And Wes, that would be one heck of a 2-for-1 if South Carolina could pull it off.
Yeah, no doubt, man. And I think, all we can say there is just, I think keep an eye on it, man. And there's been Florida State chatter there, but I don't know. It doesn't really seem, again, and some of this is me leaning on the different Florida State sites out there and what they're reporting and what they're saying. Doesn't necessarily seem like the traction is there yet with Florida State and these guys. And I think worth pointing out, worth mentioning, very smart move for South Carolina, as you just said, circling back to Jake Johnson late in the process, but with everything going on at LSU, knowing that Jake could potentially open up and be open to seeing other schools. I remember Jake Johnson was at the Rivals camp that you and I went to when we saw Delp, right, Chris?
Yes, he was, and he was impressive.
He is a massive human being.
Big dude. Big dude, can catch it, projects as a good blocker, good kid. I mean, there's a reason. There's a reason he has all those offers in that ranking.
Yeah, and I don't even think we necessarily spent any time talking to him because it was just, that he was a lock to LSU. And, dude, I remember watching Max Johnson throw at Rivals camp years ago when he was a young prospect. Max was one of those guys that came onto the scene very, very early. And South Carolina had offered him under the previous staff. What were you about to say, Chris?
I'm sorry. I was just saying like his 9th grade year, I think, is when he was,
Well, and
8th or
I was
9th.
about to say this, and then I was like, could that be possible? But maybe it is. I feel like we watched, was J.C. Horn? Is that possible that J.C. Horn, we could have been watching him and Max Johnson was there as Max?
Yeah. JC was in the 2018 class. So we probably saw him in the 2017, like a 2017 Rivals camp, and Max was in the 2020 class, but that would have made him, a freshman? So
okay. Yeah, I swear I think they were at the same Rivals camp in the Atlanta area.
And Trevor Lawrence.
Yes, we did see Trevor Lawrence there. But even back then, you were like, okay, this Max Johnson kid can straight up spin it, and there was talk about him as being a major prospect. So just again, those are 3 guys in the portal right now: Rattler, Stogner, and Johnson to keep an eye on. Stogner, I think South Carolina, it seems that they're very much in it, Chris. He is the one guy on this list that you're looking at right now who has truly taken a visit to South Carolina since entering the portal, at least as far as we know of. And visit went very well. There's been some Ohio State buzz, a little bit of Alabama buzz. Not sure if there's much cooking there, but it really appears South Carolina is in decent shape with Stogner. With Rattler, he had a Zoom call with the staff earlier this week. All indications are that went well. That we'll see. I think with all these portal kids now, though, especially, I mean, both South Carolina's not getting both quarterbacks. Like that's not going to happen. So, and now I saw somebody on here said earlier that they read it on a message board that South Carolina was getting Spencer Rattler and Max Johnson out of the portal, but you're not getting both of them, and so it will be interesting to see how Carolina sort of juggles. It's just like high school recruiting, you're juggling guys at the same position, right?
Yeah, you are. I mean, and it makes it, and it's not the same as juggling. Sometimes you'll see teams bring in 2 quarterbacks in a recruiting class, sometimes 2 really good quarterbacks. Sometimes you'll see a quarterback in a class. South Carolina is likely, Wes, going to have, if they can land a transfer quarterback that they want. Obviously, they're aiming kind of high right now. They're gonna fit this mold: a high school quarterback, Braden Davis, and a transfer quarterback in the same class. What you're not going to see is 2 transfers in the same class. Quarterback's a unique position. Those guys are transferring usually because they want to play. And so you're not going to get two who leave their situation that's probably pretty good. You know, a lot of times, Max Johnson and Spencer Rattler, I know Rattler got benched for part of the year. These are guys with starting experience and high level experience. They want to go play, so they're not going to go somewhere and beat each other up in practice and see what shakes out. You're not going to have that happen. So you do have to, it is a kind of maybe a delicate situation. And I am kind of fascinated to see how it plays out. If South Carolina can get one of them, obviously that'd be tremendous. But how do they play it in terms of maybe potential visits here in the month of December?
Yeah, we shall see, and we will keep tracking it on GamecockCentral.com. By the way, interesting comment, and shout out to our friend Donnie Soul saying, I never hear anyone speak about how the transfer portal affects young men in high school trying to get a scholarship like my son, Nick Soul. He's an alternate for Antonio this weekend in Myrtle. Yeah, Donnie, that's a good point, man, and certainly we want to wish Nick luck at the game on Saturday. Nick, a great looking prospect, tall kid, athletic at wide receiver. For those of you who do not know, plays at Dutch Fork. And I do think and hope that the new scholarship rules that are being put in will help this maybe a little bit in that now if a school loses 7 guys to the transfer portal, they can replace up to 7 guys in the transfer portal. Now, obviously, they can use those 7. Some of them are going to go right back in and go get transfers, incoming transfers. But it does at least relieve what I would say is a little bit of that pressure on the roster size. In that, sometimes scholarships were starting to go to portal guys that would have in another world gone to a high school kid. You hope that with the extended number of scholarships available that maybe it sort of comes full circle and more high school guys get those scholarships as well, Chris.
Yeah, and you saw, good example right here, South Carolina last year, the 21 class that was, a weird class because of the circumstances, but South Carolina went portal heavy. Now, a lot of that was necessity, but a lot of their spots, what did it end up being, Wes? 7, 8 guys that they took from the portal. I always lose track from last cycle, 2021 class. They could have used a few of those on high school guys. And so when you see that at a lot of programs, it snowballs. I think that's a good point. Now, that 1-year waiver, the 7-man replacement rule, that is just for this year. So is there going to be some sort of addressing or some sort of change to the portal process, for lack of a better term, going forward? I don't know. Maybe it corrects itself because a lot of people, parents, for example, are making that point that Donnie made, that it is in some regard affecting opportunities. Seeing a lot of high school coaches have been saying that because college coaches are out, not maybe even looking for, well, what developmental high school guy can we bring in? It's what, big time portal guy can we go get? Wes, do you know, I'm going to put you on the spot. What's your guess for how many players from FBS have entered the transfer portal since August?
Since August?
August 1st, FBS players, so Power 5 and Group of 5. What would be your guess? And by the
800.
way, I would hate if you asked me this question. That is actually a good guess. 600, according to the Rivals transfer portal, 693 FBS players. 11 of those have withdrawn their names. So it's 386 Power 5 players and 307 Group of 5 scholarship players. It would be fascinating to get the data, like in a year on where all those guys ended up. Did more Group of 5 guys go down or up? Did Power 5 guys go Power 5 or down? A lot of times I think you'll see Power 5 guys go down more often, right?
Well, and it's kind of interesting, Chris, along those same lines, fans will naturally say, like, let's say just for example, South Carolina offers Jimmy Smith from, FCSU. then fans will be like, oh, this is an FCS player. I don't want him. Well, then let's say South Carolina offers a guy from that was at Florida that's in the portal. Fans will be like, oh, SEC player, go get him. Well, there are some guys, a Spencer Rattler, a Max Johnson, Austin Stogner, Quinn Ears. There are some guys that are out there at FBS programs that still would be instant impact anywhere they went. But there are going to be a ton of guys at FBS programs that are in the portal. Like, I hate to say it like this, but since we're not talking about individuals, I will, that were just busts, that just didn't pan out. So how many guys are in the portal from an FCS school because they either were a late bloomer or they just really improved or they were a misevaluation from the FBS schools? Like they really should have been playing FBS. So, if a guy is in the portal from an FCS school because he's not playing down there, certainly South Carolina shouldn't be and won't be recruiting him. But I think you can find players at these, quote, lower levels if you go out and find the right guys. And you really should not sit there and down a guy just because he's not coming in from FBS, in my opinion. So it's going to be really interesting. Fans are going to get excited about hearing about, the Max Johnsons, the Spencer Rattlers of the world. But if you're Carolina, if you're other schools, you have to be really good about picking which guys across the entire FCS transfer, like across the entire portal. Really, you got to be smart, and you can't just automatically. To me, it's not the same as signing like a 2-star player, like an unranked player. It's different, and there are going to be guys at lower levels that should have been playing at a higher level in the first place. I think those names just have not like matriculated out yet. We probably don't know who those names are going to be, but don't be surprised when they pop up.
Yeah, it's almost a more professional approach with the transfer portal. High school, you're so limited, and this is why high school recruiting is really pretty hard. If you're landing a bunch of no-brainers, guys that have 40 offers and are 5 stars. If you have for instance, if you have 5 classes in a row where you've signed the number 2 recruiting class in the country, your team is probably going to be very talented. You're probably going to be very good. If you're not doing that, if you're 15 to 30 every year, that's when it's just kind of like, who knows? Because think about it, NFL teams have almost unlimited resources and access to college players, and they still whiff on a bunch of them. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be even more so in high school. When you take the portal, it's almost more of a pro approach. You have college film, whether it's sometimes maybe it's just practice, but a lot of times you have actual game film. You're able to go talk to that. Maybe you even call up a coach or somebody in the industry. You can ask about them. So I think with some portal guys, you can know what you're getting a little bit more. And you can also pluck from different levels. The NFL teams, they take from every level, Division III, Division II, FCS. And those guys end up being starters. Like you listen on Monday Night Football where guys say where they went. It's not all of them are from Alabama. You get small schools in some of those instances. And so you can find players from every level, no doubt.
By the way, you were sort of half guessing earlier. How many guys do you think South Carolina took from the portal last year?
I kept thinking 7 or 8. 8. Oh, really? It was more.
10.
10. Okay.
Yeah. So, and actually, interestingly enough, and the thing about the portal is there's no like direct, like when do you stop counting? You see what I mean? Like with signing day, normally it's by classes. Like class of 2022, by high school graduating class. With the portal is pretty much open at all times. So South Carolina actually, from the day Beamer left the program, the day Beamer arrived at South Carolina and took over, the day basically that Carolina had a new staff in place, up until basically July 14th, this year, which is the day Mike Wyman entered the portal. South Carolina had lost 10 players to the portal and had gained 10 players from the portal. It was exactly even. Now, of course, after that, you had what? Jordan Rhodes, or Trey Smith. There are several guys that have entered the portal. But, yeah, so 10 guys in. Now, one of them has already left in Karan Prunty. That was the most recent guy. But Prunty, Tyrese Ross, Carlin Splittell, E.J. Jenkins, Jaysean Barham, Keem Green, Jordan Strong, Debo Williams, David Spalding, Amarian Brown. So that was their 10-man transfer class last time. I don't know if there'll be 10, but I think there'll be quite a few incoming transfers again.
Yeah, I think, now that 7-man replacement limit does not, just to clarify, does not have to be transfers in also. It can be high school, JUCO, whatever. So it kind of depends. They may use some of those spots for high school or JUCO guys, depending on what they can get down the stretch. But I think, could you see 5? I could certainly see 5.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily. Well, it kind of depends on who they can land, like who's out there.
It's a big part of it.
If you kind of get the snowball effect and you land a big name guy and more people want to play with him, it maybe snowballs on you. Let's hit our Primal Gourmet chat line. T Thompson weighing in. T always has good questions. Is Landon Sampson still solid after the TCU offer? I would say yes. This kid has been about as solid with South Carolina as anybody in the class. So that's a great offer for him. I think it says something about his game, Chris. I think it says something about how highly thought of he is with some coaches, in Texas. When you talked to him before, this has been, I don't know, weeks, months ago, there were some schools behind the scenes trying to sort of get involved as well. I don't remember who they were off the top of my head. I don't even know if you said who they were publicly, but at the times, even Sampson was sort of just kind of, I guess, laying low and not really entertaining those.
Yeah, he was. And I think they were like Texas, Ohio State was communicating. Can't remember if maybe A&M. TCU obviously hiring a guy who's a former high school coach in the state of Texas and then was an assistant at Baylor. They're really going to canvass that state and do a good job with the relationship. So not surprised that offer came, but man, it came out with the Quinn Ewers stuff, because they're close. They used to play in high school together. So a lot of people asked and saw some headlines about, hey, when Quinn Ewers inevitably transfers back somewhere in the state of Texas, he wants to recruit some guys. Will Landon be one? And we were told Landon's not a follower. He wants to go carve his own path, and it's kind of a unique kid in that regard. So everything still looks very solid for the Gamecocks.
No doubt. All right, so we're going to get on out of here, but Chris, you want to tell everybody about Dead Soxy? I believe they got a special deal going on right now, huh?
They do. So check out deadsoxy.com. Hey, if you want to use the 25% off promo code on deadsoxy.com, it's cocky. Do that. But they can do you even better. If you're ordering $120 worth of socks, which would get you a load of Dead Soxy socks, you'd be set for a while. 30% off of that, and it's Holiday 30. You can go to 40% off if you go to the next tier, which is Holiday 40 is the promo code. So 25% off with Cocky. If you spend a little bit more, Holiday 30 will get you 30% off. DEADSOXY.com.
All right, yeah, we appreciate Dead Soxy as always. Appreciate our buddy Clint Hammond as always, our presenting sponsor here, and of course our friends at Primal Gourmet. And we appreciate y'all. Always appreciate the support, everybody that joins us in the chat. There was plenty to get to today, so I think we actually hit most of what we had planned to get. Next week, bowl practice starts. National Signing Day on Wednesday. Again, 9 a.m. to noon on National Signing Day. We'll be right here, podcast form, YouTube form, Facebook, Twitter, all those things. Also on 107.5 simulcast. We'll be joined. I guess we can go ahead and tell them right now. Quarterback Braden Davis is locked in as a guest. That guest list will be hopefully expanding heading into Wednesday. So that'll be fun. Chris, any closing thoughts, man?
No, man, I'm tapped out, honestly. Lots of good stuff today. We'll reset tomorrow. We're not tapped out in general. Go to GamecockCentral.com. Tons of content, more coming.
No doubt. He's Chris. I'm Wes. We appreciate you, and we'll see you soon.